Hey everybody, welcome to Down Home Backyard Gardening. Are you a brand new gardener? Is this your first year gardening? You're all excited, you're ready to rock and roll, you're gonna take over the gardening world with the largest tomatoes, the biggest harvest of peppers anyone has ever seen. But you're a beginner gardener and you're starting to kind of feel overwhelmed, you're starting to second guess yourself. If you're new to gardening, watch this video. I am going to give you 7 tips that I wish I had known before I started, or I wish I had spent a little time thinking about before I started. These 7 tips will help you as a beginner gardener, I promise. And everybody, let's grow. I've been gardening for 4 years now. Would not consider myself an expert by no means, but I do have 4 years of experience. I absolutely live, breathe, bleed gardening. I love everything about this. Even the pests, I hate them, but I love everything about gardening. And I started off with no experience other than learning a little bit from my grandmother when I was 4 and 5 and her planting that seed in my head to garden. And now I'm 4 years into this. I love it and I'm constantly learning. But I wish I had really thought about certain things, and I hope this video will help you, if you're a beginner gardener, be successful your first year and your second year, and so on and so forth. So let's get right into it. Okay, these tips will not be in any specific order of importance. They're just 7 tips that I sat down, wrote out right off the top of my head. And the first one is very simple. Y'all, start small. Start small. As you can see right here, the only thing I started with was this bed right here behind me. It goes along this entire fence line, and this was a flower bed. But once I started to convert it into gardening, I changed out the soil, made this a garden soil, and then I slowly started adding beds to this backyard, slowly, to where now 4 years later, the backyard looks like this. But I started small. I did not come out of the gate swinging and have 15 raised beds and 40 containers for container gardening and 20 different types of plants. I started small. I had a few jalapeno plants, I had a few squash plants, I had a few tomato plants. So I did not overwhelm myself at the very beginning, because if I had had this garden when I first started, I probably would not have continued gardening. I would have been overwhelmed and probably would have quit, if I'm going to be completely honest. So I started small for a reason, and that was because I wanted to hone my skills with different plants slowly as my experience grew and as my garden as a whole grew. So my advice is, if you are literally a brand new gardener, start small. Consider maybe container gardening right off the bat before you get beds, or maybe put in one raised bed and hone your skills on that raised bed before you start moving on to expanding your garden. But the very first advice I give everyone is start small. Hone that experience on a small level before you expand to a much larger level. Trust me. The second tip I'm going to give is, look, expect setbacks. Don't expect to come out here because you've been reading up all the books, you've been watching YouTube channels, and you're seeing all these massive, major, crazy harvests and think that right off the bat, that's going to be you. It might be. I'm not going to talk down and say, oh, you won't be able to do it. But if you're a beginner gardener, you want to expect setbacks. You don't want to get so focused on, okay, I planted this plant and I'm going to get 30 squashes off of it. Chances are you planted that one squash plant and didn't know you had vine borers in your area, or ever even heard of a vine borer, and they destroyed your plant, and now you're destroyed. You're devastated that you lost that plant when you had all your hopes built up into that one plant. Now, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm just giving advice. Expect setbacks. Even right now, behind me, I've got all these beds going. I've got tomatoes over here. I've got squashes and zucchinis and beans and peas and everything over here. And just yesterday, I found 3 squash plants that actually had squash on them that got nailed by vine borers, and now those squash plants are gone. So like, even an experienced-ish gardener like me got destroyed yesterday mentally, because I was like, man, I'm going to have 4 squashes or 3 squashes already, and they're all gone. Those plants are dead because a stupid little vine borers got in there. So again, expect setbacks. And a setback could be anything. It could be that you planted your starts too early before your last expected frost date, because you didn't even know what a last expected frost date was. Or the pests came in too early and you didn't catch them in time, or you planted something in the sun that should have been in the shade. All I'm saying simply is just expect the success, but also be realistic and know you will 100% have setbacks. It's just part of this journey. Okay, the third tip is focus first on a few plants. Why do I say this? Because I currently right now have 25 different plants growing right now out here. And of those 25 different types of plants, just the tomato plants alone, I think I have 15 different varieties, maybe 14 or somewhere in there. So I have a lot going on. I have a lot out here. But I honed my skills that first year, or that first season, honestly, on just a few crops at a time. Figured out exactly what I need to do for those crops, and then started to expand to other crops as I learned and as my experience grew. So my advice again, focus on those few plants that when you think of gardening, they just make you excited. Whether it's a squash or a melon or peas or beans or tomatoes, figure out whatever those 2, 3, 4 crops are that really get you excited and just make you just bubbly to get out in the garden. Focus on those. Focus on those. And then remember that there are different seasons and that different crops need different seasons. So we're in spring right now. Focus on whatever crops that you're excited about for spring. Then be thinking ahead. Oh, summer. Okay, well, what crops grow in summer? Ooh, I'm excited to grow okra, as an example. Or, hey, I really want to grow the biggest, prettiest purple cauliflower. Well, those are brassicas, and those are going to be in the fall or the winter, depending on where you are. So your first year, my advice is focus on the crops for each season that just get you excited, that make you just beyond, for lack of a better word, excited to get out in the garden. And then hone your skills on those few crops before you start moving and multiplying your garden into more crops, more beds, etc. So third, again, hone your skills on a few crops that just honestly put a smile on your face and get you to want to go out in that garden. Behind me is part of my container garden, because I actually have containers literally all through the rest of the garden. But when I started to expand my garden, before making other raised beds, I actually started putting in containers, or a container garden. Now, if you have a limited space, say you live in an apartment, but you really want to grow your own tomatoes or your own jalapenos, you have the space, if you have enough space, to put a 5-gallon bucket or a 3-gallon bucket. And you can start your gardening skills in container gardens. Now, even though I have this backyard full of raised beds, I still have the container garden, because for me, I want to be as a diverse gardener as I can, because container gardening is completely different than raised bed gardening. And here's one simple example. These containers can only get the nutrients that you put in. They can't send their roots out to go find what they need, like crops placed in an in-bed or an in-ground raised bed can do. So you have to always be ahead of the game with your container gardening, ensuring they're being watered, they're being amended, you're providing fertilizers or composts, things of that nature. You have to always be thinking on container gardening, and it will just make you a better gardener, because you have those different skills that you need for this as opposed to these in-bed garden beds. One other reason I highly advise container gardening is you can move the containers around. So if you have a pepper plant, as an example, that's doing really, really good right now in spring, when the sun isn't as hot as it's going to be, say, late July, early August, well, then you can move that pepper plant to a more shaded area where it's not getting that evening sun, as an example. So container gardening is great. You can constantly keep moving your containers around. You can keep moving your plants around. And on top of that, it's once again giving you a level of experience that you would not have if you strictly stick to an in-ground raised bed. So again, consider container gardening at the beginning because it will help you in the long run, both in your garden and in your experience and your knowledge level, for sure. Okay, the fifth tip I'm gonna give is very simple. If you've gotten to this part in your journey of gardening and you're ready to rock and roll as soon as you can get out there and get things going, or maybe you've already started your gardening, continue reading, continue watching YouTube videos, continue learning, never stop learning. This journey, which I always call gardening a journey because it never ends, y'all. It is a journey and it's a beautiful journey, but you are going to have to continuously keep learning. And what do I mean by that? You're a beginner gardener because you're watching this video, right? So maybe you're really already good with tomatoes, even though there's so much to learn about tomatoes. Maybe you're really good with tomatoes, but you want to get into another crop, maybe carrots. Now, carrots are completely different than tomatoes. And I don't mean just in how they look, obvious. I'm talking about how you grow carrots. Carrots can be one of those crops that people just cannot get to grow because they are a finicky, kind of a pain in the butt crop to get your mind around and to start learning the tricks to get them going. So keep learning about what is important to you and keep learning about the gardening community in general. My last video was over a topic that I have never, ever thought of until 2 weeks ago. I've been doing this for 4 years now and never once even heard the term vermicompost, which is worm composting. No clue, but I'm constantly trying to learn everything I can in this garden. And a little side note right here, don't be afraid to fail. You can read everything ever known to man or mankind about tomatoes, and you could watch 40 different YouTubers and how to grow the most beautiful, indeterminate beefsteak tomato on the planet. And then you get in your garden, you follow all these steps, you're ready to rock and roll, and it doesn't work for you. Well, that's fine. Shift. Don't be afraid to fail. Tweak everything that you're doing if you need to. Find out what's best for you as a gardener, because what's best for you might not be best for me. Or where you live might not be the same type of climate that I live in. So what works here in zone 9A north of Houston might not work for you in zone 8A, 3 hours north of me, or vice versa. Or you're on the other side of the world and you're dealing with completely different pests that we deal with here in America, or the climate's completely different. Whatever it is, continue learning everything that you can about gardening, whether it's the zone that you're in, the last and expected frost dates, 4-year zones, what crops grow best in your area. Anything that you can think of, continue learning, reading, researching. Don't ever stop, is what I'm saying. And if you're a beginner gardener, you've probably already started doing this. So don't stop doing it. Continue learning, researching, and reading everything you can. And then push those limits. Okay, tip 6, which I just kind of referenced a second ago, pushing limits. Now, what do I mean by that? If you have read everything you can about, let's just say, tomatoes, and you're ready to rock and roll, and again, things aren't working the way you expect them to work, well, don't be afraid to push a limit. And an example would be, let's just say, a frost date, just as an example here. I, this year, used my March 1st expected frost date as my borderline, my start point. But I was watching the forecast, and at the end of February, there was not any risk of frost after February, I think it was 21st. So I went ahead and pushed the limit and thought, you know what, I'm gonna get a 10-day head start on my garden. Well, I came out and I planted everything in the garden. that I had started inside. I moved all my container gardens, my container plants back outside, and I pushed the limit of the frost date. Now that was risky, I know that, and you can't always go off of forecasts, but I had a gut feeling that I was going to be safe, and I was. But that was me pushing a limit where everyone's like, oh my gosh, never plant before the first frost date. Well, watch your forecast, and if it's favorable, roll with it. One more example of a limit that I like to push is spacing. Now you could read all the books, you could read the back of all the seed packets, and they'll say 18 inches apart, 12 inches apart, whatever. I go off of what I think is going to work for me. It's not like I've been perfect in this, but I like to push limits. I like to try different things, and I don't think us as backyard gardeners should be so stuck to all these rigid rules or all these rigid guidelines. Push the limits on what you think would work. Try them. If they don't work, they don't work. Adjust and move on. Be super flexible. Just don't get so stuck into, I have to do it this way, I have to do it this way. Because again, what might work for me might not work for you. Be flexible and adjust whenever you need to adjust. My 7th and final tip to beginner gardeners is this: experiment. And just like I said a second ago about being flexible, experiment with what's best for you. If you think that this might work for you, but it's against what all the channels and all the books say, go for it. It might be the best thing for you. And if it works for you, put it out to the world and let other people know so we can learn and we can experiment with it and see if it works for us. I do that all the time on this channel. I love to experiment. I love to read something, come out and push the limit, or watch a video, come out and push that limit, or change it up a little bit, or get sucked into TikToks and Instagram reels or Facebook reels and be like, you know what, I'm not sure if that hack would work. Come out and try the hack. I've had success with them both working and not working. And you know what? If you experiment or you're flexible on something or something doesn't work and you fail, you're going to learn more from failing than you are going to from succeeding. So experiment and expect for it to fail. And when it doesn't fail, then it's just an added bonus. But don't be afraid to experiment and go against the grain. I love to go against the grain out here in this garden. I think it's fun, I think it's exciting, and I will show everything that I do either way on this channel to help everyone who watches, or to let them know, hey, this isn't gonna work. Or maybe it will work for them, just not for me. But experiment, have fun in the garden. And I think if you have fun and you follow all these steps, your first year, your first season, your first year gardening experience is going to be enjoyable. Very, very, very enjoyable. You will have successes and you will have failures. You will deal with something you've never heard of, or you'll have an experience that you could not have prepared for, but those are going to make you a better gardener. So have fun when you're in the garden, but again, start small, expect delays, expect failures, continue reading, continue learning, be flexible, and definitely experiment with what you think will work in your garden. One thing I did not cover in step 5, the reading, researching, is research the pests for your area. That is my bonus tip to everyone. Research the pests that you're gonna have to deal with, and make sure you know what they look like, and make sure you know what the beneficial insects are and why you need them, what to plant, and everything. I have videos on these 2 topics that I'll put up right here that will help you as a beginner gardener. But definitely research the pests, learn what they look like, and then research the beneficials and understand what you need to plant for them and what they look like. You don't want to kill a beneficial at all. All right, everyone, that's the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you learned something. If nothing else, I hope your first season, your first year of gardening is a success, that you continue down this journey and you don't get discouraged. Just keep pushing your knowledge, your experience levels, and continue enjoying this journey that you've decided to get on. It is so rewarding, it is so worth it, and you are going to flourish by having this as something to do. Believe me. Everyone, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, share it, like it, and subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already. If you are not a subscriber, you're a beginner gardener, and you're looking for a beginner gardener type of channel, then you found the right one. And if I have earned your subscription, please hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you're always notified whenever I upload videos. And until next time, everyone, take care, God bless. Continue to shine bright and harvest hard. Follow these steps if you're a beginner gardener. They will benefit you down the road. I'll talk to y'all again real soon.